it seems like our budget crisis, it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse like very, very quickly. So in all likelihood, I'm not saying we're going to be defaulting anytime soon. I'm just saying the likelihood of it happening is increasing like very quickly, which is kind of scary. Moody's on Friday downgraded its credit rating of the US by a notch to AA1 from AAA, citing rising debt and interest that are significantly higher than similarly rated sovereigns. That's not great. That's not great. Moody's was the last among major ratings agencies to keep a top AAA rating for U.S. sovereign debt, though it had lowered its outlook in late 2023. On Friday, the agency changed its outlook on the U.S. from stable to negative. Ooh. What does that mean for us? Look, the reason humans exist is so that we can build institutions that exist as hoarding pools of money, right? There's a lot of money in the world, and different places you can put money have different returns on investment and different levels of safety. That's basically the only reason the human experiment exists, okay? And one of the safest places you can put money is it's in a treasury bond, right? You buy some government debt, you get a guaranteed interest payment on it, you get a guaranteed amount of interest, right, after a certain length of time. It's a safe place to hold your money. The United States historically has been a safer place to keep your money. U.S. debt has been a safer place to keep your money than, I don't know, buying the debt of Libya, to use a prior example. Not as safe, not as assured. But nobody considers the United States a AAA ranked place to hold your money anymore. The main reason for that, as cited here, rising debt and interest. And again, we pay a lot on the interest that we hold on account of our debt. What was it last year? It was like 850, how much is it? Billion? $881 billion on interest from 2024. Nearly $1 trillion. More than the amount we spend on our military just went to interest payments. Money we give to people who hold U.S. debt. What's the interest? Well, it depends on what bond they bought and when. It varies significantly. You might note, however, a worrying trend for any of you interested in, finances, I guess, as a concept. Cumulative interest costs this year are higher than in recent years. Now, obviously, for fiscal year 2025, we have the most alarming line yet. You might also notice, by the way, that like just going over the past 5 years, this number's been skyrocketing. Look at this. 20 and 21 were basically the same. But post-COVID, 22, 23, 24, we've gone from the interest payments being, I mean, Christ, they've like almost tripled. It's not good. Will this affect my S&P 500 index? Yeah, probably. I wouldn't say 22 was post-COVID. Post the start of COVID. In a post-COVID world. Post it beginning. And after the beginning of COVID world. So far in fiscal year 2025, if we're estimating the amount of money that's been spent on everything, here's Social Security on the top, and then higher than Medicare, Medicaid, income security, and defense spending is the net interest. And this is going up fast, by the way. I mean, you can take a look here where it's gone up nearly 3 times in just 5 years. It is going up very, very fast. So, yeah, our country is pretty much... This is the reason, by the way, why Trump's budget failed earlier today. Why Republicans in the Budget Committee voted against it, which we'll talk about in a second. But the reason it failed is because these budget hawks are concerned that they're not cutting enough. Unfortunately, there is a logic to what those Republicans are saying. Right now, the plan from, like, in accordance with the Trump budget is just what national debt? Who cares? There are some budget hawk Republicans who are essentially saying, well, come on, man, we do want a country in 5 years. Now, obviously, the way we want to deal with the rising debt is by taxing people more. But that's not on the table. Even Democrats don't have the balls to do it. So what happens when our debt is greater than our Social Security? Well, it can just keep going up, right? We have to dedicate more and more of the national budget to paying down the interest. And what happens if we just can't pay the interest? We borrow more to pay the interest. We do what we've been doing for a long time. Not great fiscal practice when it goes out of hand, which is you sell debt to raise the money to pay the interest. The problem being, of course, since you're paying the interest and not the principal, you're selling more debt that contributes to a higher interest rate. I mean, not to do the whole Republican budgeting a government or budgeting for a government is much like budgeting for a household, but we're literally like borrowing payday loans. We're taking out payday loans to pay off our interest. Why not pay off the debt? With what budget surplus? We're running a massive deficit. With what budget surplus? In 2024, the cumulative deficit was $1.9 trillion. So we would need to raise, just going off 2024 numbers, $1.9 trillion more just to break even, just to not have more debt than before. We'd still be paying the interest, just not have any more debt. And we need to raise quite a bit more than that if we ever actually wanted to pay off all the debt. The interest is skyrocketing. It honestly looks like, I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk about it because I think it's a little bit like abstract. And also conservatives disingenuously evoke these talking points very often. So it makes it difficult to talk about. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to do besides a default. Like genuinely, it's, you can default. You can reevaluate our currency and crash the global economy. Oh, both would crash the global economy. You could raise taxes on the ultra wealthy. Read some MMT, Vosh, Jesus Christ. The most convincing pro-MMT argument I've ever seen. Defaulting is not an option, really. I mean, not if you don't want to end the world, basically. Don't we also want to cut things, just different things? The main problem with our spending isn't that we spend too much, it's that we raise too little. Seriously, like, we spend too much on the military, but we spend more on Social Security than we do the military. Like, significantly more, you know? The real issue is we just don't raise enough money. We have been cutting taxes and cutting taxes and cutting taxes on and on and on and allowing for these tax loopholes so corporations pay nothing. So we're spending the same amount. No one... Please read some MMT asshat. Second most compelling MMT argument I've ever heard. What's the debt ceiling? Can't we raise it again? The debt ceiling just describes how much we're allowed to borrow, which we raise constantly. But that's the problem. We keep raising more debt, which increased the interest. That's kind of the problem, you know? Yeesh. Look at this. From the St. Louis Fed. Look at that. Federal government current expenditures interest payments. So this is in billions. You go back over here. How much are we spending on interest on our debt every year? You know, 10, 20, 100, 200. Okay, we kind of flag and waver a little bit right here. This is still like a lot of interest that we're paying, but okay. Now you might notice that recently there's been something of an uptick. Problem is we're reaching really bad numbers. It's not good. Look, it's decreasing right here. Q1 2025, that's true. At one point you were pro-raising the debt ceiling. Well, we have to raise the debt ceiling or the government shuts down. The debt ceiling is stupid. Like the government shutting down isn't an option. You have to raise the debt ceiling to continue. I just want to raise more money via taxes. Yeah, I want cuts to the military and I want our Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security spending to be more efficient through selective decommodification of some industries. But overall, no matter what, a modern government's, you know, spending sheet's going to be pretty extensive. You can expect the US government to spend many trillions of dollars every year, no matter what. You can cut as much as you want. It's not going to change anything. Not without breaking the country, at least. We can, however, raise a lot more money. I don't know, man. Does Trump care about this? Not really. There are some Republicans that care a lot about the deficit, but they're only pretending. If they really cared, they would raise taxes. It's that simple. It's literally a mathematically unsolvable problem unless you raise taxes. It's totally unworkable. There is no way around this. You can cut Medicaid, you can cut Medicare, you can cut Social Security. It's not going to make a difference. We're running multiple trillions of dollars of deficit. It's just going to keep going up and up and up. Is this because of the tariffs? No. A lot of this goes back to the quantitative easing. It's kind of like can't believe the Fed actually did. Why the sudden increase? Wokeness, mostly. So I'm trying to find some applicable charts. The system of growth is based on hegemon and global reserve currency status of the USD. With the impending collapse of that reality, we can't infinitely print money. Well, the thing that bugs me, I guess, about MMT, the way people argue in favor of it, is that it's fantasy world politics. Nobody's following this system. Nobody's acting in accordance with it, even if everything you said was true, which I doubt. Like, nobody's acting in line with it. You would need to rule in that principle. You would need to act consistently, and other nations would have to be on board with it too. You know, it doesn't really describe the way things are. Who are we paying interest to? Tons of other countries. Anyone who holds U.S. government debt. So ourselves, we're paying interest to ourselves to an extent. We pay interest to a lot of U.S. citizens, a lot of people around the world, different countries, different corporations. Anyone who wanted to buy debt. Okay, just put the deficit chart in the bag, please. You can see the COVID stimulus spending years right here. Very expensive. I'm curious, would a default be good under your accelerationist positions? That would be very, 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 very bad. That would be very bad. Is buying a bond different from buying? No, when you buy a bond, you're buying debt. That's what the government. When the government sells a bond, or a treasury bond at a given yield, you are buying their debt. That's what they're offering to you. I'm trying to. What was the thing I was trying to look at here? Here, U.S. average tax bracket per year over time. Google, please help me out with this one. Historical average federal tax rates for all households. That's not a chart. That's numbers. God damn it. Show a plot of the tax rate. Well, I would like that. Make your own chart. Thank you. Average individual income tax rate. And for people in the lowest quintile, it's just been more and more negative over time. A huge spike here in 2020, largely because of COVID. It's pretty much the same across the board, man. These first 5 columns are the quintiles. For the lowest quintile, the average total federal tax rate as a percent has gone from 9.3, I'm not going to count 2020 because, again, COVID, to 0.6, or basically nothing. For the next quintile up, it's gone from 15% down to 0.8% on average. The next quintile, 19.1%, all the way. Oh, so I'm not. That's right. I'm not counting 2020. I'm not counting 2020 because that's anomalous, right? 15 down to 8.9, 19.1 down to 13, 21.7 down to 16.7, and 27.1 down to 24.3. It's just across the board. Got to raise taxes. The 1% got richer. Yeah, it's worth noting that like a part of the data that's not really shown here is the fact that like people in the upper quintiles are more capable than before of paying higher taxes. You know, they have gotten much wealthier. And this is just the federal tax rate. We're not even talking about like a capital gains tax or business tax. Well, if anything, this contradicts my narrative because it seems like it's more or less held steady right around here. Federal receipt. Oh, this is no. This is federal receipts, not money raised. Receipts is spending, where the United States has consistently fallen on the lower end in the tax to GDP ratio. But is this tax percentage or is this like total tax accrued? Hold on. Describe. I'm not math pilled enough. Describe to me what you mean by tax to GDP. It looks like percent. Well, that's not what I'm looking for, then, is it? 480 billion. Okay, so that'd be like what, 1/6? Versus 1/6. Actually, the percentage is much the same. Then what explains the difference? Tax revenue as a percentage of real GDP. You did your math wrong? I don't think that's possible. It must have something to do with the, what's the right term? Liquidity of money? It must have something to do with how much that money flows around. I wonder if there's some math I could find on that about the different levels of liquidity in different countries and how much it might contribute to the effectiveness of like a velocity of money and how it might enable higher levels of social spending. Talk to an economist. No, they're boring. Graph showing what you're looking for. You know, people love to say that. Tax revenue total percentage of GDP. Okay, there you go. Yeah, with the United States. Where's the United States? Okay, I see. The United States is down here. Definitely on the lower end. But we're right next to Switzerland and Latvia. And Switzerland definitely has more responsible, at least with regards to social democracy, more responsible social spending. So what explains the difference? Well, maybe it's not about the GDP itself and more to do with the total amount of money sitting in your country, right? Because the GDP refers to the value of goods and services over a year. But if money's just sitting in a bank account or in a person's like hedge fund or whatever, it's not necessarily contributing much to the GDP. So there might be like a bad ratio between the GDP and the total amount of money. The velocity of money in Swiss bank accounts is 0. Sure, but that also wouldn't contribute much to the GDP, right? I wonder, oof, that's difficult to calculate. Okay, you know what? I'm going to get back to this later. My economic illiteracy aside, let's focus on the thing that matters, which is that the United States is going bankrupt, and it's very bad. That's the important part. I think spending's a better metric versus GDP, maybe. I mean, the problem is that when a government taxes, when you pay your taxes, the idea is that that money just continues to circulate in the economy, right? Like the government spends that money, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the military goes to millions of workers, you know, federal workers, right? the money doesn't just disappear, it continues to circulate. The idea is that the money that is taxed is it has a high velocity. So how much money in the United States has very little velocity? Because it just sits in investment. Because of course the United States is like the investment capital of the world by far. Huge amounts of money. You understand what I mean? It's a question of like where that money goes. Where is it sitting? How much of it is actually getting recirculated? Because my argument has always been the problem is that the wealthy hoard so much money that doesn't even see daylight. It just sits in their accounts, and as a consequence of it not being not having any velocity, it doesn't move around. You know, it doesn't get taxed. It doesn't contribute to the GDP. It doesn't get used. It doesn't flow around. It just sits. They just take loans against it. Yeah, they use their wealth to leverage new loans, which isn't the same thing as using that money. Graph showing that US velocity of money has been nosediving. Again, from the St. Louis Fed. Oh, okay. I legitimately do not know enough to like evaluate this metric, but that's actually crazy. Like, I'm not educated enough to know like the how to evaluate the numbers fully, but you know, to whatever extent this describes 2008 and the pandemic. Yeah, oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, if anything, it kind of seems like what's that dip? Well, it's COVID and the 2008 financial crisis. And it seems like the pattern here is the wealthy have just been acting more and more like dragons. Look at M1 velocities as opposed to M2. Okay, so this is the relatively high velocity money then, M2? Okay, you're not going to believe what the M1 graph looks like. Wow, this is... holy shit. The y-axis of this goes from 1 to 11. Okay, I think we found the data that I was looking for. Oh my God. This is why I keep bringing up quantitative easing as the big issue we're dealing with. When interest rates are basically nothing, the rich have no incentive to grow anything since they can just borrow money and that borrowing costs nothing and you don't have to pay taxes on the borrowed cash. It's what built the fracking industry and the tech sector as we know it. The financiers are going to destroy the country again for like the fifth or something time. COVID really was the great redistribution of wealth. No, that's not what this is. This describes the velocity of money. Basically, like how much M1 money gets moved around. And the lesson here is that at first, after the 2008 financial crisis, but especially after COVID, the wealthy have just been sitting on money. They no longer move it around. They're no longer willing to make investments or exchange it or move it around from place to place or do anything that enriches anyone. They just sit on it with the safest possible deals, you know? It stops getting put back into the economy. What's an M1 money? I think this refers to like relatively liquid forms of wealth. Quarterly average of M1. Oh dear. Okay. M1 consists of currency outside the US Treasury, Federal Reserve banks, and the vaults of depository institutions, demand deposit commercial banks, less cash items in the process of collection in the Federal Reserve float, and other checkable deposits consisting of negotiable order of withdrawal or now, beginning May 21, currency outside U.S. Treasury, depository institutions, deposits, So yeah, this is accounts at depository institutions, shared draft accounts. This is basically just liquid currency. And then they changed the definition, but in a way that I'm not educated enough on the subject to describe. And this is just the total amount of money being held in a more or less liquid form. Does this relate to index funds at all? No, it wouldn't, right? Okay, sorry. They changed it so M1 includes savings. So basically what this is saying is that after COVID especially, everyone was just like, it. We're not doing the market. We're going to sit on cash and never move it. Like you have a slow increase and an increase in the increase over like after 2008. But this right here is just, we are going to sit on the dragon hoard, right? No M1 is cash. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like liquid currency, like cash. Yeah, $20 trillion just sitting, doing nothing. And then this is the velocity of that wealth relative to how much there is of it, like weighed against the GDP. The ratio of quarterly nominal GDP to the quarterly average of M1 money stock. So what this describes is the relationship between how high the GDP is and how much people are just sitting on giant piles of cash. Why would the rich do that? Because they can borrow against it. They don't have to spend that money. When you're that wealthy, you just leverage your existing wealth to borrow new wealth, which you don't have to pay the taxes on. You get it. You just use the existing money to make more money. You don't have to risk it by investing it anywhere. You don't have to take risks. That's why wealthy people don't stop being wealthy anymore. All the wealthy people just keep being wealthy forever, basically. I think it jumped that drastically because savings accounts were added to the M1 definition, which is money that people save. I mean, would it not make sense to add it to the definition? Doesn't that work? I'm just saying that's why there's a vertical line. I guess the unfortunate thing about the change in definition is that it's difficult to know how much using the current definition would have changed this earlier graph. I guess you could look up like how much money existed in saving deposits over time and try to like stitch together the data. Historically, M2 includes the savings accounts, and the M2 chart still looks like this. Look at M0, it was not changed. M0? How many M's are there? My God. Apparently not that many. Can I get the M2SL? Yes. Okay. So this just describes, okay. No, it says M2 also had its definition changed in 2020, though in this case, there wasn't as much of a bump. Okay, let's just look at M2, because M1 looks like it's a lot more susceptible to the definition change in May 2020. May 2 consists of M1 plus savings deposits, small denomination time deposits, less individual retirement IRAs, depository institutions, MMFs, less IRA, and then in 2020, some adjustment, I don't know, my eyes are blurring, which didn't have too much of an effect. The change is still pretty evident. M3 includes shit like derivatives. Oh, don't get me started on the derivatives. Has this been of interest to anyone? I found this enormously interesting as somebody who is, and I've always admitted this, by the way, not an econ head. Am I incorrect in looking at this and feeling like it's quite spooky? I mean, I feel like my assessment of this is accurate, even if my understanding of the underlying data isn't perfect. I feel like looking at this and like gesturing my arms, like flailing them around is appropriate given the information. It'd be more interesting if I understood better. I think at the end of the day, the reason our country is rapidly increasing its deficit and interest payments is because we don't raise enough money via taxes. We don't raise enough money via taxes for two reasons. One, we've lowered the tax rate on like everyone, right? And for two, and this is the big spooky scary one, it seems like the wealthy are more and more holding their wealth in ways that taxes don't reach, you know? Because we don't tax people for their wealth. We tax people for their income. We tax people at points of sale and exchange. So it seems like, and that's what we're looking at when we see charts like this. We're seeing, oh no, this is the interest payments. When we look at charts like this, what we're seeing is like more of the just raw wealth, not GDP or anything, but literally like the cash money, dollar, that you could, if you wanted to, like exchange and get in person and stack up a giant cube of it like that. The more and more of that isn't circulating. It's just being held by the wealthy so they can leverage borrowing against it, which is not a form of raising wealth that taxes get at. In order to do that, you'd need to have like a wealth tax, which again, we really, really need. Because you can ratio our tax revenue up against the GDP, but the GDP isn't reflecting the total amount of money that's being hoarded in Dragon Vaults, you know? Does that make sense? That's my understanding of what I'm looking at. We're dealing with a situation where we at both ends, or at all three ends, we're spending too much on stuff like the military, and through Medicare and Medicaid, we pay out too much to healthcare companies and stuff. And we're not raising enough taxes because we aren't like taxing people enough. And then at the other end, not enough money is moving through the economy because it's being pulled out of the economy and safely held in like Dragon Vaults, where they just use their existing wealth to leverage new debt without having to pay taxes on the actual like bulk of wealth. Whereas if they were making new investments, they would have to pay capital gains tax or income tax. Do I have that correct? There's actually a debate among economists whether or not we should tax people's incomes or people's wealth, because having government revenue dependent upon income is counterintuitive, because you would lower government revenue when the economy got bad. Then you have to add in the impact of deficit spending in a floating fiat currency. Now everyone's brain is soup. I mean, I agree that sounds difficult and complicated, but it feels like we're kind of looking at an economic apocalypse right now. Again, I defer us back to the amount we're spending on interest every year, where in 2020, the total interest paid was $352 billion. In 2024, 4 years later, that number more than doubled. Like, how do you think this is going to look in 5 years? Then it's going to be up here, man. We're going to end up spending like half of our tax revenue every, like, and the more the interests go up, the more the deficit goes up, because we have to borrow more to pay the deficit. And the budget that Trump has proposed makes it even worse. Yeah, in billions. This is $21.5 trillion just sitting. Only a few decades ago, it was like not even close to that. But like it's enough. You could literally, you tax it and then the government spends it, and then the money reflows through the economy and enriches everyone, and then it gets taxed again, and you get to keep doing good things forever. Is America's Economy collapsing, not a good thing in an accelerationist perspective. I have a feeling that what's happening in America right now is also happening in every country on Earth, just maybe a little bit less or maybe more pronounced. I have a feeling looking at these numbers that this is a global problem and that it's not just us. It's like the world doesn't have a response to this. Wait, monetary base total? Okay, wait, hold on one second. Am I tripping? Monetary base equals currency in circulation plus reserve balances. In circulation. And right now it's a little under 6 trillion. So am I misreading the numbers, or am I correct in looking at this and assuming then that like a quarter of the total amount of money in the country is circulating? Like if the M2 number is up here at 21 trillion and the monetary base is around 5 or 6 trillion, like 3/4 of the money in the country is just flat out sitting, like just locked away. That's not even talking about like the Cayman Islands or offshore accounts or whatever. Just genuinely like being held in vaults where no one can touch it and it benefits nobody. Correct? That's cool. It is a little bit affirming to have a visual representation of something that I've been saying for a while, which is the reason it seems like everything is getting more expensive and nobody can afford everything, or nobody can afford anything despite the world having so much wealth and efficiency in it, is the fact that there's the real economy where money circulates and the fake economy where it doesn't. And that the fake economy has gotten way the too big. You have an actual economy where you like buy groceries and the groceries pay for wages and the people with their wages spend it and stuff like that, you know? And then you have a fake economy, which is just like numbers and money. I'll try to look into this more. I also know for a fact that my understanding of this is like pretty limited. So if I like spent more time reading up on it, I could make a better point. But I feel like if you're watching this right now, you probably agree at least with like the bulk of the idea.